Hey, Chapel here, and today's video is going to be a quick look at the new patch we just got on V-Rising on June 4th, so it's a little under a month. The 1.0's been out now. And this one, outside of the usual bug fixes and such, we actually got some balance changes. So I'm just going to be running through those and giving my thoughts on it, and if I think any of these change anything. As they've noted here, these changes aim to just even out the playing field slightly, and that seems to be exactly what they've done. Most of these are pretty tame. They've not completely gutted anything. They've not gone over the top on buffs for the most part. I think there's a few outliers on that, but I'll go into that in a minute. But yeah, I'm just gonna go through, give my thoughts. Starting off with Whip primary attack. They've reduced the line damage, but then increased the damage at the tip. So this basically means if you're tippering the attacks, the damage will be the same. If you're hitting it in close range, then the damage will be lower. And while this makes the whip slightly weaker, it doesn't nerf it enough to make it not OP. It will still be very good to whip spam, because the main things that make it so strong is the range of it and the fact the attacks come out so fast that it basically outclasses pistols. It's perfect for hitting veil attacks. So doing this, it's made it a little weaker, but it's not really changed much in that sense. Next, going on to Warrior Blood, reduce the parry reduction a little bit. So when you proc Warrior Blood to get a parry, it'll be a 40% damage reduction rather than 50. Small nerf, but once again, not a huge difference to Warrior. Warrior will still be on about the same level. Next, the Rogue set, another 5% reduction across the board to the critical power. So Rogues will be doing a little less damage, but the other bonuses, the blood itself, most notably, will not be changed at all. This is just the armor set, and this is pretty justified considering this was easily the strongest armor set. It was often being taken with Warrior Blood as well as just on Rogue Blood, so it's definitely a well-justified nerf, but once again they've not gone too far with it, so the power of it, I still imagine it being the best set overall. It's still going to be viable on both Warrior and Rogue. Next, moving on to some of the movement speed spell changes. So this is the buff spells that they've all been changed here, all been nerfed. And with how dominant move speed is, this was very much a necessary change. Starting with Power Surge, this one actually got quite a big set of nerfs here, with the move speed being reduced, but also the duration, and the duration on the duel as well. So it's caught quite a few, compared to Blood Rage, which was pretty widely agreed to be the stronger of these buff spells. Yet this has actually been power shifted. They've reduced the move speed. It's got the reduction on the duel as well, the lifetime, but it's had a 5% increase on the healing. This was not needed at all. So Blood Rage is not only still going to be the strongest, it's caught a weaker nerf than the other ones has. So it's without a doubt the strongest of the buff spells now. Like, no doubt at all on that. Finally, Curtain, another move speed reduction from the duel and the base spell, and that's quite a lot as well, 15% overall between the duel and the base amount. So yeah, a lot of move speed reduction across the board. The durations also hit these spells a bit, but like I say, they're still going to be top tier spells. Blood Rage especially, given the fact it's actually had that healing increase alongside the nerfs it's had. And now these are the ones I like. This is the buffs that benefit Scholar massively. There's a number of offensive spells here that have had their ratios upped by differing amounts. Shadow Bolts had a 15% increase. That's one of the big ones. 15% on Shadow Bolt. This spell is awful. It's completely outclassed by Crystal Lance. Given the fact it doesn't have a CC, I still imagine that being the case, but this is getting to the point where it is hitting really hard. So there may be more use for this, and it is something that I've been trying out a bit so far today. It's feeling a little better, so we'll have to see. But this is one of the bigger buffs for sure. Sanguine Coil, 5% increase. Spell is not very popular across the board because it's sort of trying to do too many things at once, and this is a very small increase, but you kind of have to when it's a very spammable spell. If this was increased enough, then you would take it just for the damage alone. But it's got that. The fact it's got the healing is a nice bonus, but it just doesn't stand up to the damage of other spells. And healing in general, in this game, tends to be a weaker mechanic when it's in an unreliable form such as this. Like, you have to actually be landing skill shots to get full value. And when you could just play something like Blood Rage, which gives the healing guaranteed, that is the problem that Sanguine Coil has. So, although it is somewhat underplayed, like no one really touches Coil much at all for the most part, I don't think this small buff will make much of a difference to that either. It's only a 5%. Chaos Volley, another 5%. This one benefits from it a bit more. It's 2 projectiles, so it double dips on a 5% spell buff. Volley was already okay when you're comboing it with Scholar Blood. Once again, this will just make it a bit better. This is the biggest one. This is the biggest buff of the patch. A 15% spell buff on Spectral Wolf. That's the same as what Shadow Bolt got. The difference is Spectral Wolf is a spell that cleaves, so this gets so much more value from a 15% buff. It's a weaker spell in duels, but taking this into a raid, this is probably going to be one of the best raid spells now. Like, being able to bounce this off golems, being able to bounce it off servants, like, there's so much value from this. You'll be able to absolutely, like, nuke people with full scholar set and 140% spell power from 125. That is a major buff on this one. So I would expect to see more Spectral Wolf because of this. Wraith Spear, damage increase 10%. This spell has too many issues with it. It's very telegraphed, and 170% still isn't really enough to be worth it. The mobility is nice as well, but when it's a spell like this, you can't bait cast it, and they're basically going to get a guaranteed counter every time you hit it. It's hard to see Wraith Spear having a space still, even with this buff. I don't imagine it being good. Frostbat, another spell is in an okay spot, is borderline viable. A 10% buff should be able to help it out there. You can combo this with the Mace Artifact quite nicely. It has a lot of setups from that. So there are going to be some of the builds using this that are a lot better. Aftershock. Now, Aftershock is in a pretty okay spot. It's still outclassed a little by Void, but overall it is quite strong, so it's unsurprising this has only seen a small buff of 5%, whereas a couple of the weaker AoEs of Bone Explosion and Ice Nova have got 10% buffs each. Okay, so it does help both of these spells out. I think Ice Nova especially will benefit more from this though, because of the fact it has the recast effect that you'll often be getting extra value here from, because it's I believe a reduced spell power version of the main one. but it will increase the damage of that. So yeah, this spell double dips on the buff a lot more. Alright, we now have defensive spell power changes. First of all, Blood Right. This poor thing has had a lot of damage taken out of it. I think that this one they've gone a bit too hard on compared to the others. Because this was the third strongest of the counters, yet it's had, by the looks of it, the biggest nerf from what I can see. It's had 20% taken out the base damage of it, another 10% from the jewel, and another 10% from the daggers. That is a 40% spell power decrease, which is a big nerf on Blood Right. And yeah, like I say, given the fact it was already weaker than the Cold Snap and Discharge, and it provides less utility, the damage is the one thing it has going for it, and they've really hit this one hard. Cold Snap, on the other hand, reduces shield duration, reduces the freeze duration, and 10% off the move speed. So it's toned down a bit across the board. I think overall, given the utility it had with the move speed and open world, this was the best of the counters, and I think it'll continue to be that way. Discharge, it's had the stun duration decreased on both the base amount and once again on the jewel. It's reduced the immaterial duration from the jewel, and there's been the biggest nerf is probably here to the recast jewel, which was really obnoxious, but it still does its job. It denies sword Qs and any kind of punishes afterwards that are in melee, and there's less knockback on it now, but it'll still do that. So once again, Discharge, Cold Snap, they're still going to be very good. I don't think that's changed much there. The final set of changes here actually do hit Discharge a little bit more. It also hits Lightning Curtain a bit more, and finally it hits Cyclone. So this is the charged attack jewels getting nerfed by 5% per stack. I believe it stacks up to 3 times, so at max stacks you're losing 15% damage, which does help with taking out some of the bursts that you'll be having when getting hit by Discharge or just Lightning Curtain hitting into it. But you'll still be gaining a lot of damage from those lightning charge attacks. It'll be noticeable, I imagine, but not to the point of making any of these spells bad. And finally, the stun duration, we'll have to see, but I guess this will be nerfing both Static Dash and Cyclone especially. As long as you can still combo into Spear Q out of it, this doesn't really matter. If this makes a difference of not being able to true combo Spear Q, then that's a pretty significant nerf. But we'll have to see on that. I've not been able to test it. So yeah, overall, pretty nice to see a patch like this. It is quite small changes in terms of the overall meta, but it's certainly some movements in the right direction. I'm happy with all of the changes that have been listed, so we'll have to see if it does cause any developments in what people are playing. But for now, I'm looking forward to giving it a try. Anyways, have a good day, guys. I'll see ya.